I recently was asked a question at one of my seminars from one of the attendees. What happens when you're in a relationship and it seems like you're giving your side, but you're not getting reciprocity? You're not really receiving back as much as you'd like. You know, what do you do to get them to be more participative in the relationship? Well, I won't say that's a not, that's pretty common. That kind of question happens. In a relationship, there are kind of three different types. You can be the underdog and put them on a pedestal and minimize yourself and exaggerate them when you're infatuated. When you do, you will tend to sacrifice what's important to you to be in relationship with them because you fear the loss of them. Because anything you infatuate with stimulates dopamine and oxytocin and vasopressin, and you kind of put them up on a pedestal and you get a high, you get a pleasure out of it, and you feel the loss of that. It's like, imagine that being prey and you want to eat it and you fear the loss of that and starving. When you do, you'll be giving more in the relationship and sacrifice for them, and they'll be the overdog, you'll be the underdog. They'll be more narcissistic, you'll be more altruistic in that dynamic. Not that they're a narcissist, they're not. They're just a human being, but they play out that side when you're playing underdog because you don't have a match. Everybody's looking for a fair exchange, a match. But when you're minimizing yourself and exaggerating them and infatuating and fearing their loss, you will end up giving more and trying to live in their values until eventually you get resentful and build up enough resentment to say, hey, I deserve better than that. And in the process of doing it, they'll either come down and start to match you, or you'll be freed from being with somebody that's really not all that interested that you're interested in. So that's a feedback to let you know that you were the underdog in that. And that's called caring. Well, that's called careful. You're walking around on eggshells, careful about losing them. And they're afraid to say too many positive things because they don't want to mislead you. And you're afraid to say negative things because you don't want to lose them. That's one type of relationship. The other type of relationship is a careless, where you are the overdog and they're the underdog, and they're afraid of losing you, and they're willing to sacrifice a whole lot of things that are important to them to fit into your life. They inject your values in their life and try to live in your values for fear of loss of you. But you don't feel that you have a match, and so you kind of don't want to mislead them by saying too many positive things, and so you'll say more negative things to keep them at bay because you know that's not a match. You know it's not really an equal, and it's innate. And then there's also now, and by the way, the person that's the underdog is the one that's feeling like they're giving more, and the person that's the overdog doesn't feel like they're getting enough of what they want. And what's interesting is Stacey Adams, who created equity theory, said when two people are in one of these scenarios and they're judging each other above or below them and they don't feel like they have a match, these altruistic and narcissistic personas come about. That's not who they are as a whole. That's just who they are in that dynamic temporarily. And it's unfulfilling because you don't feel like you have a reciprocity. You don't feel like you have sustainable, fair exchange. And as it's been shown, everyone keeps an inventory of everything they've sown and reaped in a relationship, what they've given and taken. And so this person feels like they're giving more and not getting as much. And this person feels like the same thing because they feel like I'm not getting what I want out of that relationship. It's not fulfilling. They're the underdog. I want a match. So eventually that lets you know that that's probably not, unless they come and bring those back into balance, that's probably a transient relationship. And then there's a third type of relationship called a caring relationship. So you had careful, careless, and now caring, which keeps the rings on the finger, by the way. And now you have met somebody who's a match. And the sign you do that is because when you're above and then somebody's below, they're afraid to say negative things and they're afraid to say positive things. But when you have a match, you're able to say positive and negative things together. You have banter. And you kind of respect them because they keep you in check. If you get a little cocky, they can bring you down. If you get a little humble, they can lift you up. And there's a bantering mechanism, and feels like there's a match. In that case, there's now more of a reciprocity, more of an equanimity within each of them and equity between them. And now there's more of a sustainable, fair exchange relationship dynamic. I call it care ring, which keeps the ring on the finger if you're married. Now, this one is something that most people are striving for. But some people, when they're infatuated, they confuse, when they're playing the underdog and they're infatuated with this person and they're conscious of the positive but unconscious of the negatives, that dopamine impulse to make them want to go after them is strong, and they're blind to the downsides. And eventually this person that's not bringing reciprocity is trying to let you know this isn't a match to them, and they're giving you feedback. And so that's a blessing, actually, because it's giving you feedback that this is you're going after, and cathexis of libido. You're basically giving away all your libido energy towards this something that's not really reciprocating. It's not interested. And so now, if you all of a sudden value yourself and stop being the underdog and learn to communicate what you value in terms of what they value, they get more engaged, and they humble themselves because they don't want to lose that, and they bring it back down. So you could bring a relationship that's like this back into this if you learn the art of communicating what you value in terms of what they value. So they feel respected and they feel like they're getting something out of the relationship. You can turn it into that. But many people don't. They stay in their trap, and they expect something for nothing and not giving a fair exchange. But if you have a caring relationship, it's more likely to last, because now there's a dialogue. When you're down here, you're speaking, they're not listening, and they're speaking, you're not listening, kind of thing. And it's an alternating monologue when you got one or the other. But when you're in the center, you have a dialogue. And dialogue, through language and through respectful communication, is what increases the probability of a sustainable relationship. So you got a number of options if you find yourself not getting reciprocally what you want. You might have a conversation with them and let them know what you want so they don't have to guess. If you're projecting an assumption that they're supposed to read your mind and know you're just supposed to know what's on my mind, what I need, that's kind of delusional. So give them at least something that's realistic. But if you're expecting something that's no human being is going to be able to provide, let me give you an example. If you expect them to be positive and never negative, or be peaceful and never wrathful, or one-sided, they're not going to be able to live up to that. No one can. If you're expecting them to live in your values completely, then that's another illusion. They can live in their values, and they can communicate in your values, and they can be both-sided, because that's what you're going to expect. You can't even be one-sided. So if you're having unrealistic expectations, you're going to turn them away. But if you have realistic expectations and you communicate what you value in terms of what they value, you have a higher probability of reciprocity. And reciprocity is a feedback to let you know that the way you're communicating is effective and that you got a match. It's letting you know. Because somebody, when they're afraid of losing you as much as you're afraid of losing them, you keep the dialogue going. Or if they're both in a situation where they're strong enough, where they don't require anybody, they just communicate and respect and appreciate each other, then that's even more empowering. So just know that if you care enough about somebody to communicate what's really important to you in terms of what's really important to them, it's best to find it out. That's why on my website, drdemartini.com, I talk about values and how to communicate effectively with them and how to determine them so you can do that. And the breakthrough experience, the seminar that I typically give, is to help people master that skill. So if you have felt like you've not gotten the reciprocity, hopefully this information I just shared could be help. But if you really want to learn the art of communication, go on the website, determine theirs and your values, and link the values together. How is what they're dedicated to serving you, how's what you're dedicated to serving them, and come to the breakthrough experience so I can show you actually how to do that and teach you realistic expectations in relationship dynamics. So you're not trapped in these alternating monologues and you get to have some dialogue.